Hello, today we will be talking with the head of the People in Need organization, Szymon Panek. Hello, Mr. Panek.
Hello.
Dobry den. Thanks for having time for our conversation. Mr. Panek, your organization had its first initiative to help people outside of your country in 1988 during the earthquake in Spitak, Armenia. Can you tell us more about it, how it started? What did you know about Armenia before the earthquake, and how you decided with your friends to collect some money, warm clothes, and to help Armenians?
Yes, that's partially true, but in fact it was not organization, because during the communism it was difficult to start non-profit, non-governmental organization.
Just an initiative.
Yeah, we were just a group of friends which traveled in 1986 to Priel-Brucie, to North Caucasus, to Georgia, and to Armenia as friends, as to see different culture, different place. And at that time, thanks to already Gorbachev changes and other things, it was perestroika, and it was not without a little bit of cheating. You had to add some places to the paper from the border control. So we put also Tbilisi and Yerevan, and we were very impressed by people here. I was 19 years old. It was my biggest adventure to go to such a places, and I remember it was summertime, August, very hot. But the people were spontaneously talking to us. We have a good Russian from the school. And then 2 years later, or 2.5 years later, when the earthquake happened, we were sitting with friends and watching the horrible pictures in the TV. And there was a very little of aid, of solidarity from Czechoslovakia. There were planes from France and Iran, even from United States. So we decided, let's go and do something. These days we would call it as a civil society action. At that time we never heard about the civil society concept, because we were a communist country like you. And everything was controlled from the top by the communists, basically.
From Kremlin.
Yeah, from Kremlin and also, but we went to Soviet embassy at that time in Prague, in Czech, and asked, would you be okay, or would you help us if we will start collection? And the answer was yes, because Soviet Union was getting more open at that time. And it was enough mandate to basically announce the public collection of the warm clothes, blankets, sleeping bags. And I remember I was basically shocked. The people were staying the queues to come and donate and to help the people in Armenia. And then for me, it was a kind of initiation, moment. And based on that experience that people are basically good and they want to help others, if they believe that it will work, that it will not be just communist, that it will change something. And based on that experience, probably it led us in the beginning of 90s, 1992, 93, to establish the organization, which is called People in Need. And the first few years we worked basically in the conflicts in the post-communist countries, in the Nagorno-Karabakh situation, which was very tough at the time, 92, 93, but also in Croatia, Bosnia, in Balkan countries, in Chechnya, 94, 95. So that was the beginning of People in Need, working in the basically fellow post-communist countries where the conflict started in many places.
When the Soviet Union collapsed and, as you mentioned, different conflicts emerged, your organization had this, I believe, belief or at least hope that with support, the conflict in different places could be overcome and better times will come. After more than 20 years, in one of your interviews, you, considering the situation that crises still are there in post-Soviet countries, especially after the Crimea crisis, you said that this is because we are still in transition period. What are your assessments on today's development? Are we still in transition, or do we have even a step backward? Or Fukuyama was saying the collapse of Soviet Union was starting of the end of history, but are we ending up in history?
No. That's a very good point, because I would say 10, 15 years ago, we were definitely still in transition, including Ukraine, which tried to get out of the control of Kremlin few times, basically. The Maidan revolution of dignity was the third time since collapse of the Soviet Union, and it was immediately followed by Russian aggression, basically, because Russia didn't want Ukraine to move towards Europe. That was the main reason, in my opinion. But these days, we definitely see the kind of a crisis of the developed world, crisis of the West.
Crisis of liberal world also.
Crisis of the liberal world, maybe we can phrase it this way. Of course, the history goes up and down. It was always like this, but it's true that last maybe decade with Brexit, with the rise of the populist parties, rise of not very liberal, conservative, right-wing parties. Definitely second election of Trump being US president. It's showing that the liberal democracy is struggling for the moment. It could be for different reasons, because the world is changing from a basically multipolar world or unipolar world, multipolar during the Cold War between Moscow and Washington, unipolar basically after the collapse of the communism,
with
where
the USA
with US and maybe alliance between the Europe and US. This was clearly the center of the weight of the world, which some, including thinkers and philosophers, again and again criticized as not very fair, which conceptually sounds nice to have just unipolar world. So now we are entering the multipolar world.
Mm-hmm. Some researchers also refer to it as a multi-unipolarity, not only multipolarity.
It could be because of the regional weight of some of the powers, for example, South Africa, Brazil, India, of course, China.
Global South.
Not only. I would say that, between India and China, there is, of course, competition and always had been, but the Chinese ambitions are now clearly worldwide. China is active in Sri Lanka, opening the ports, buying the mine industries in Africa, so that's the definitely superpower, which is the global ambitions. Russia had during the big Russia, during the Soviet Union, again now during the Putin's Russia, they have their imperial global ambitions. They don't have means to be really globally active, but they do a lot around. Just let's remember, Georgia war, then Crimea, the Russian operations in Syria, which were the Russian air forces basically saved the Syrian regime for a long time, and by the way, they were very brutal. We work in Syria, so we saw how brutal was the Russian air attacks, basically, against the civilians, civilian targets as well. There is definitely ambition on side of Brazil or maybe Mexico. So the world is changing, which sounds theoretically, philosophically better, but for the life of the people in many parts of the world, it's less predictable, more vulnerable, there is a clear rise of authoritarianism, so less individual rights, less guarantee of justice, less freedom. So we are entering a very kind of a volatile, difficult time, or we entered it already a couple of years ago, where the Western countries, or liberal democratic countries, little bit struggling, because democracy is a complicated concept. You know, you need time, you need to discuss the things, you need to come to conclusion or to consent, while authoritarians just, you know, say it will be like this.
And also name it in different names: sovereign democracy, I don't know,
Yes.
our own democracy, and other stuff like Russians do, or like Iranians do, for example. Taking into consideration all these very complicated situation in international relations and also in global sphere, how this influences on the work of the organizations like yours? People have not only need of humanitarian aid, but also need of freedom of expression, freedom of expressing their political views and other things. Do you have also some programs referring to this kind of works in post-Soviet countries, and not only there?
Yes, you are right. According to some statistics, 72% of global population live in authoritarian or dictatorship type countries, which is horrible number. It's almost 3/4. And what we do, because we feel certain moral responsibility to continue with, of course, non-violent support of dissidents, intellectuals, of civil society groups, activists, bloggers. It can be environmental groups, it can be, you know, feminist groups. There is a wide range of the active people which are not happy with authoritarian rule. And while in our countries, in Armenia, these days, of course, in EU countries, they can do whatever they want. They can issue the media, they can call demonstration, they can criticize the government. In non-free countries, of course, they are risking. And what we do, we try to support them in their struggle by technical advices, trainings, communication means, access to international information sphere, because if you are in Minsk, it's important to have a means to let the people in Berlin or Brussels know what's happening in Minsk, for example. So, and we still remember it from the communism, how important was the support of very small group of dissidents and intellectuals and writers which was coming from Germany, France, Sweden. So we kind of continue. It's also in line with the values of our late President Václav Havel, the leader of the Velvet Revolution and humanist and leading intellectual figure. He was always supportive to the groups which would like to have a dialogue with the power, basically. Of course, the power usually don't like the dialogue, so it's
like monologues.
Yeah, it's of course, you know, even in democracy, politicians are not always happy to get, you know, difficult questions, but in autocracies or in dictatorship kind of countries, the politicians just don't want to discuss with inhabitants, with people, with initiatives. So what we do, we try to level a little bit the ground to support them. The important is that it's own struggle of the people in their own country. So we are not here to tell them what they should fight for or what they should think or do. So it's not export or import of the things, it's support of the things. And that's key, in my opinion, because it's respectful. So we supported for a long time the Russian civil society groups. Nowadays, most of them are in exile, of course. We work in Central Asia, we are in Belarus, we work also in other post-Soviet countries, in Moldova, in Ukraine. Partially situations are different, but the concept is same. We also work in the Middle East and in the Central America, in Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, countries which basically oppressing human rights. We are not everywhere because we can't cover everything, but at least partially we know that we can contribute into the support of the groups of usually very brave people which are facing threats, blackmails, imprisonment, sometimes torture, sometimes even risking their lives in those countries, because some of the dictators go that far that they order killing of the, journalists or activists because they are too good in investigation. They come with corruption or misusing of power cases, or they are just too annoyed by questions. So it's not often, but it's not rare that activists or journalists which are facing the struggle with authoritarians or dictators can be even killed.
Yes. You mentioned the importance of supporting and not importing some values or desires. In that regard, dealing with big organizations, sometimes there is fear that they have a hidden agenda with their support of different programs or projects. In your interview with Forbes, you mentioned that your organization, being located in Czech Republic, has this privilege not being associated with these big countries and not having this fear coming from the different countries where you support different organizations. Now your organization has big donors, and one of them is European Commission, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Do you feel that you still have this privilege being an organization from small country and not having an hidden agenda?
Well,
perception of hidden agenda.
I hardly can be fully objective because I'm the head of the organization. So to be 100% sure, there should be some independent commission checking what we do, how we decide. But I believe, yes, we are still independent. European Commission is there, but there is also Czech government, German, British, Swiss, Canadian governments. There was also US government, which is gone now. And
because of Trump's decisions.
Because of Trump's decisions to stop aid abroad, basically, to make it simple. And also in organization, there is a very, I would say, strong, genuine energy, because we were also started as a group of volunteers and activists. And I would say that internal truth and internal discussion not to be instrumentalized by someone, not to be not to be used. It's very strong in the organization, and it will kick from within also if we will be moving far or moving to be instrumentalized by someone. Of course, the donors, they have their vision, what they want to fund. If it's education, it's education. It cannot be something else, to make it simple. But we have also the right to apply or not to apply. And we are not applying to every call for proposals. We definitely don't want to be funded by the donors which tied their funding with promotion of religion, their foreign policy, maybe economical interest, maybe geopolitical interest, which I would say that United States or even, for example, the foundations from Gulf states are more prone to do. They have more temptation to tide it. And now with Trump, it will be probably, you want US funding, so you will do US things, basically. Yeah. So it's painful to lose US funding, but maybe for this moment, it's healthy, basically, But in the long term, I think it's absolutely crucial that the organization is not misused by one side or one group. And the diversity of our donors, it's a good prevention to that. In terms of other agendas, it just comes from the size of the Czech Republic, because it's 10 million country. We don't have a strong economic interest or economic means to dominate the economy in Armenia or elsewhere. We don't have a strong mining or oil companies like US or others. We don't have a strong army. Our army is very small, hardly able to serve the things in Czech. So the Czechs as a country based more on culture and sports and being in the heart of Europe, it's really not a threat internationally. So that's by definition. And regarding our independency, yes, there is some threat if the donor fund 80% of your budget, for example, then it would be a problem. In our case, the biggest part, it's 20-25% from one side. It was US and EU as well, but then we have a big portfolio of the donors.
So diversification
and also internal ethics and culture, which is very important in the organization. It's part of the prevention to be misused for some government's agenda, basically.
You already mentioned about all the projects your organization did during the first Nagorno-Karabakh war, but you were also the one of the organizations who helped also to Armenian refugees after 2020 war and also after ethnic cleansing of 2023. Could you please elaborate more? What kind of projects are you doing concerning refugees in Armenia?
Yes, absolutely. Being here and facing the crisis, or which the people in Karabakh, of course, faced in Armenian society, it was absolutely natural that we open basically the refugees or IDPs receiving centers in the east of Armenia, in Goris. We secured the funding from our own sources. People in it has tens of thousands of monthly contributors. So we have some own funds which are coming from Czech people, basically. We also secured the EU funding and US funding at that time. So thanks to the money and thanks to our capacity, we were able, together with the local authorities and some of Armenian organizations, basically being the first point, helping in the beginning with the refugee or IDPs packages, basic things, food, water, other things, then helping with distribution of more substantial things mainly for the host families, but also for the families of people from Nagorno-Karabakh. Beds, blankets, clothes, household equipment, in the both waves, because usually the quick humanitarian assistance, it's almost the same every time. But we didn't want to drop it, so we moved more to second phase. We are trying to persuade the government that they should offer some sustainable means of people from Nagorno-Karabakh to settle down, persuade in terms of our expertise, because we deal with the cases of concrete people, concrete families, their needs, issues of their income, their accommodation, work or employment. But we also, as much as we can, we are trying to contribute financially. So some of the projects are like piloting of 150 abandoned flats to be repaired for people, supporting the social work, which is helping the people from Nagorno-Karabakh to get what they have the right to get from because it's also sometimes work. The social organizations cannot replace the government. They can be complementary to the government, especially in some phases. But because the people is at the center of our work, we sometimes work with the people through consultation and basically helping them to get what they what they have the right to get from the government programs for helping the people. So it's a mixture of the different types of the support and interventions, but it's still the process. The numbers were high. Armenia economically is also not that strong.
And some experts also say that international aid Armenia received to help refugees is not as big as could be. What do you think is the reason for that?
I don't know the numbers, how much Armenia got, but I'm afraid that last few years it's a part of the trend in the sector, because generally the economies of the most economic strongly countries and democratic countries, because it's not doing very well. So the budgets for the aid in Germany, since last year in Britain, EU budget, newly even US budget are decreasing, so there is a less money available basically in the...
And more crises maybe in the world.
And more crises. We have the highest number of refugees since the Second World War around the globe, it's over 60 million. It's not just Ukraine, but there is a big waves of refugees in Africa, for example. Of course, crisis in Gaza will consume a lot of money. Now, not that much, but there is an urgent need to at least a little bit improve the conditions of the people in Gaza. Ukraine war and supporting Ukraine economy and Ukraine IDPs, internally displaced people, and Ukrainian refugees. So generally the situation is not good, and Armenia, on one hand, thanks to God, it's seen as stable, relatively stable middle income or upper middle income country compared to Syria, compared to Africa, compared to other places. So unfortunately, there is less money than it should be, which is a pity. And the recent development with the cuts of the US aid or US government funding, I think this is a real crisis, because as far as I know, the US funding contributed to the reforming of social services, to some of the also government projects in Armenia.
Democratic reforms and other
democratic reforms. And it will be, I presume, difficult for Armenian government to find their own sources to continue with these reforms. And in the same time, the reforms are absolutely essential for the, I would say, good future of Armenia, which is what I presume the people in Armenia hope for, to have a better future than was the past.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your work. I wish you good luck and less crises in the world. Thanks for this opportunity for conversation.
Thank you very much, and I wish especially Armenia to have a good future ahead of the country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.